Our programs offer many languages. Please visit suprememastertv.com/schedule.
Nos programas offrent plusieurs langues. Veuillez visiter suprememastertv.com/schedule.
Nuestros programas ofrecen varios idiomas. Visiten suprememastertv.com/schedule.
我们的节目提供多种语言，请看 suprememastertv.com/schedule。
The soul in man is not a separate entity, distinct from the soul of all other beings, but that it is part of the universal soul energy which flows through all humans equally and alike. Please continue watching for the teachings of the Rosicrucian order.
Hola, gracious viewers. Hola is hello in Spanish. I'm Lucia. The spirited people of the Canary Islands send you love and warm-hearted wishes in God's favor. Welcome to Self and Soul from the Sanctuary of Self, Rosicrucian Order Library, Part 2 of 2 on Words of Wisdom. The ancient mystical order Rosicrucis, also known as the Rosicrucian Order, (ORC), is a worldwide cultural, educational, and philosophical organization that is perpetuating the profound and practical teachings of the Rosicrucians. These teachings, as passed down and added to over the centuries from ancient Egypt to Europe and now all over the world, pertain to the mysteries of the universe, nature, and humans themselves. The Rosicrucian Library is a source of spiritual wisdom and insight that includes the important writings by the respected imperators of the order, such as Dr. Harvey Spencer Lewis, Ralph M. Lewis, and Christian Bernard. We will now continue with Frater Ralph M. Lewis's The Sanctuary of Self, as we read a selection from Chapter 3, Self and Soul, in Part 1 of this book, entitled The Mysteries. Here we will find elaboration on the self, or the soul's nature, as understood by the Rosicrucians. Self and soul. Since the causes of the sensations of self are quite intangible, are not identified with substance, and cannot be actually localized in the human body, they have always been most mysterious to man. Further, we cannot commonly experience sensations independently of the body. The body, however, at death, continues as a substance for an indeterminate time before disintegration, and apparently without these elements of self. Early observers were thus led to believe in the duality of man's nature. The body fell within the same category as all other reality that may be physically experienced as a matter. How then were the intangible elements of our being to be identified? The conclusion was that they must transcend the world, because of their inability to be experienced as of the world. These elements were held to be of divine nature because of their seeming infinity and immateriality. The soul, therefore, became the repository for all of these indeterminate qualities of man, the ancient Greek word for soul being psyche. This idea of soul gave expression to the spiritual life of man when he considered the soul's subtle influences its strange effect upon him as his better nature, his spiritual life changed accordingly. He tried to live in harmony with the feelings of the soul and with his comprehension of what he thought it was. How far back we may trace the idea of soul, it is impossible to determine. It should suffice to say that archaeology today has traced this concept back for thousands of years. We find the soul described in ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics and in cuneiform writing. We find references to it on obelisks in the Nile Valley and on clay tablets along the Euphrates, on stone monuments high in the mountains, on ruins of ancient buildings, in the wild jungles of the tropics, and on majestic totem poles in the frozen north. Exactly how man first came to realize or became conscious of soul is, of course, a mystery which may never be solved. Still, another theory offers us a very plausible explanation. It is one that has endured for several decades. This psychological theory for the origin of the concept of soul is that it arose in the human mind when there came about a disparity between the feeling I and the external I. This means that a difference arose between the inner I of the ego, the I of the inner self, and the external or objective I, the I that represents the physical or outer man. The Rosicrucian conception of soul is a truly mystical one. The Rosicrucian also begins with the recognition of the duality of man's nature, the physical, earthly body composed of the dust of the earth, imbued with spirit energy, the same as are all animate and inanimate things. No distinction is made between the physical nature of man's body, insofar as its basic properties are concerned, and that of any other physical substance. All are considered mundane. Then, this Rosicrucian conception recognizes the soul as a spiritual and divine essence, resident within this body, during the period of its earthly existence. The Rosicrucian also declares that the soul is unshapen, that is, that the soul has no definite, concrete form that is describable or comparable with anything of a material nature. He considers the soul as a sort of energy, just as a thought has no physical form, yet may give rise within the consciousness to the idea of form. The Rosicrucian declares that the soul in man is not a separate entity, broken off, distinct from the soul of all other beings, but that it is part of the universal soul energy, which flows through all humans equally and alike. The soul in the most degraded individual is just as pure and as divine as the soul in the highly illuminated and spiritual being. The apparent difference which exists is a matter of expression. It is a personal reaction to the soul force, just as the electrical energy which flows along an electrical circuit may, in some light bulbs in that circuit, give forth a blue light, and in others a pure white light, but the quality of the electric current is the same in all instances. The soul, therefore, in man is at all times perfect, and consequently, it cannot be perfected. To declare that the soul can be perfected, the Rosicrucian contends, is to admit of its imperfection. The Rosicrucian argues that since the soul emanates from a divine source and is the only divine essence in man, are we to declare that divinity is imperfect by stating that the soul should be perfected? The soul manifests in each of us differently because of the psychic development of the individual, that is, his ability to react, as stated before, to the spiritual force within him. It is the ego or personality of the individual which must be perfected. As we develop and perfect our ego and inner personality, we eventually come to appreciate, comprehend, and realize the soul force within us. We correct our thinking, correct our ways of living, and permit the soul to express itself without hindrance. Thus, we find some individuals more illuminated than others, more spiritual than others in manifestation, but in essence, all are spiritually alike, declares the Rosicrucian. In conclusion, we may liken the consciousness of man onto a pyramid. The point or apex of the pyramid represents the objective function of consciousness, with its reliance upon the limited 5 objective senses. What the apex of this pyramid can possibly accommodate is restricted by its limited area. On either side of the apex, we drop off into seemingly nothing, or to that which is beyond the perception of the objective sense faculties. However, as we descend the sides of the pyramid, it becomes more expansive. Finally, reaching the base of the pyramid rooted in the earth upon which it rests, we find that the earth, in contrast to the limited area of the apex, holds infinite manifestations. By this analogy, we mean that if we introvert our consciousness, turn it inward to self, we are going from the apex of the pyramid of consciousness, from the limited objective faculties and what they reveal to us, to the essence of our being, which is unlimited and acquaints us with the infinite of the universe. The base of the pyramid represents the consciousness of self, the link with soul. It is our attunement with this vast infinite intelligence which permits inspirations as impressions to come to us, to be interpreted by the brain consciousness as brilliant and revealing ideas. The more we devote ourselves to this base of the pyramid of consciousness, in other words, meditate upon and analyze self, the greater it becomes to us. Perceptive viewers, we thank you for your kind presence for today's Words of Wisdom, entitled Self and Soul, from the Sanctuary of Self, Rosicrucian Order Library, Part 2 of 2. Coming up next is The Eternal Beloved, Part 2 of 4, right after Noteworthy News, here on Supreme Master Television. Please stay tuned for more constructive programming. May you be always safe and free in God's eternal embrace.
Our programs offer many languages. Please visit suprememastertv.com/schedule and suprememastertv.com/WOW.